Alright, so hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be going over all of the DND classes, well, the ones in the player's handbook, and I'm basically going to be going over whether or not I think you should play them as a beginner, like what they are good for, what they're bad for, and some of the stereotypes attached to them. Also, just a disclaimer, even though I do own the player's handbook, and I have played a lot of these classes, I have not played all of them, and I probably will be trash talking most of these classes. Personally, I play a mix of two classes, usually being fighter and druid, which I do not recommend druid for a new player, and I'll get into that why later. So first up, we have the barbarian. The barbarian is a very easy class to get into, especially if you are a new D&D player. I always recommend, and I know this is going to sound kind of stereotypical, however, I always recommend that new players play a human fighter. However, after that, barbarian is a great class to jump into, mainly because they can rage, which is a great detail and a great thing to have you help in combat. However, they also are just overall fun characters to play. If you're not ready to jump into something like a spellcaster, this is a great class to go with. Next up, we have the Bard. Now, I personally haven't played the Bard a lot, however, the Bard is a spellcasting class that mostly focuses on support. Bards get bardic inspiration, which can help your fellow party members with rolls and other stuff like that. However, they're not going to be heavy hitters or good fighters. Now, there is not a specific healing class in D&D, however, this is the closest that you are going to get to one. A cleric. Clerics are basically people who get all their magic from a god, and basically they can heal people or they can be tanks. Also, I'm pretty sure clerics can also be necromancers, which is a very good subclass. Once again, I do not recommend playing clerics if you are a brand new character because they are a spellcasting class, and keeping track of your spells along with like all the new rules that you're learning could just be complicated. Alright, next up we have Druid. Now, I play Druid. Druids are mostly used for utility. However, if you just want to play a Druid, that way you can turn into a cat and just sneak around, don't do that. Play Druids for what they actually are. They are casters. I hear and see a lot of people say, oh, Druids aren't really that useful because they don't really have one specific, like, casting focus. Druids are utility, just like Bards. They can basically get anything done that they need to. Alright, next up we have the Fighter. Now, there's a good reason why a lot of people play human fighters as their first D&D character. Mostly because fighters can heal themselves. As an action, they can do something called Second Wind, which at level 1 gives them back 1d10 worth of health. Fighters are overall good class. It's overall a good class. And I honestly see a lot of people who just bash on fighters for being basic, when really they're not. They're a great choice. They are a little basic, and most fighters get extra abilities from their subclass. However, stuff like the Gunslinger and other subclasses like that can really add on stuff to your fighter. So like I said, if you just want to hop into D&D, have an easy character, and you don't need to worry about that many mechanics, play a fighter. Also, I don't know why I flop around my hands a lot. I just do that whenever I'm talking. Probably the ADHD. Alright, next up we have the Monk. And I'm going to be completely honest, the Monks are not that good in 5e. Unless you are going to do multi-classing or have a subclass, most monks are going to just die very early on. Or at least all the times that I have played a monk, they have died very early on, and they just don't have that much utility, at least in my experience. Now, you might have something completely different. Alright, so hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be going over all of the D&D classes, well, the ones in the player's handbook, and I'm basically going to be going over whether or not I think you should play them as a beginner, like what they are good for, what they're bad for, and some of the stereotypes attached to them. Next up, we have the Ranger. The Ranger is not that good of a class in 5e. A lot of people consider this the worst class. I personally do. Basically, the Ranger is very situation-based. I don't recommend a lot of people play Rangers. I personally think that Rangers are like the worst class, at least in 5th edition. They do have some utility, though, with like their bows and like their favorite terrain and their favorite monsters. Hey, if you ever wanted to play Batman or Ezio from Assassin's Creed as a D&D character, well, I'm going to introduce to you the Rogue. The Rogue is basically like a ninja type assassin. You can also be a pirate as a rogue. Rogues can be very interesting. I always recommend taking at least 1 or 2 levels into Rogue if you're gonna multi-class because of sneak attack. Basically, if someone is like distracted, you can add an extra d6 at level 1 to your damage dice. Which, yeah, that's a very good. That's a very good like just way to deal extra damage. And if you don't want to play a fighter or a barbarian, this is also a great class that does not cast any spells. Alright, next up we have Sorcerer. Sorcerers are what you think. Sorcerers basically get all their magic abilities from their genetics. I do not recommend playing any of these last 3 classes as beginners. However, they get all their abilities from their genetics. Maybe their parents passed down their magic, or maybe they have demon blood or something like that that gives them magic abilities. I'm also going to group this in with the Wizard because they are very similar classes. Wizard gets their abilities from, like, education. So basically they go to school and they learn different kinds of magic, and that's basically what gives them their abilities. Once again, I do not recommend playing any of these classes as a beginner because keeping track of spells can be very hard. Alright, and the last one here, we have the Warlock. Warlocks basically are people who made pacts with demons. This could be through a near-death experience or some other experience, and they get magic abilities from it. Now, Warlocks start off very weak, however, get very powerful very quickly, at least in my experience. However, I do not recommend playing a Warlock as a beginner because, again, they are a caster class. Like and subscribe, and let me know if you guys want to see more D&D content.